Boz, thanks for being with us today. We're talking to a room full of CTOs, and I want to start out by asking you about your role as CTO. You've been in place since 2022, I believe. In that short time, I want to hear, we've all read about the changing role of the CTO and how they've taken on a whole lot more responsibilities. How has your role evolved in that very, very short time? And then I have a follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, CTO is a much less standardized role than CFO or CEO, which have kind of almost statutory responsibilities. We don't, and that's a consequence. We get away with doing as little as we possibly can. As any good engineer would do, fundamental premise of engineering is be lazy so that you can build the machine that does the work for you. It's beautiful. Even within my time, 20 years now almost, at Facebook, now Meta, each of the CTOs that we've had, Brett Taylor, Mike Schreffert, they've done very different things with the role and what the role was for them. So part of that's also a strength of Mark's. He kind of takes what we're the best at and puts it there and finds someone else to help us with the rest of it. For me, at least, it's been a very, very deep technology dive as CTO into these pioneering new technologies, augmented reality, virtual reality, now robotics. What a fun job. I have the funnest job around. Obviously, for different people, I do a large organizational footprint that I'm kind of managing, and I'm advising the company on strategy and AI and technology. So I have a role that is not that different to the job I had before I was CTO. But I actually think it's a great strength that as a discipline, we can adapt to whatever is needed by the organization at that period of time.
So when you enter a new role, and by the way, if you don't already read Boz.com, I highly recommend it. I have gone way down the rabbit hole on this, and it's basically a treatise in management. You may not agree with all the principles, but I guarantee they will challenge you. And I've joked with a couple of my colleagues, and basically having read most of them, I pretty much have an MBA at this point. Thank you very much. But in all seriousness, when you take on new roles, I want you to take me back to something memorable that Mark has said to you that's been memorable and inspiring and motivating for you in adopting a new role.
Yeah, every time Mark offers me a new job, I say no. I already have a job, I like it, I'm doing great, we got a bunch of stuff. He really has to sell me on new jobs because I already have a job. And he's really good at it. And what I think the really clever thing that he does, he did it when I took over the ads organization years ago. He did it again when I took on Reality Labs at the time. It was called AR/VR. He was like, what would this have to look like for you to be excited about it? And you go off and you already said no twice. So you're just like, all right, let's imagine that. And then you end up coming up with a thing that it would have to look like for you to be excited. And he's like, great, make it look like that. This is the great Mark Zuckerberg jiu-jitsu trick that you can use to get anyone to take almost any job, it turns out. And it's so effective because it gets us out of the present moment of thinking and into a new one. So for example, augmented reality, virtual reality, I was just kind of skeptical, I wasn't sure, and I was like, well, for this to really be meaningful, you'd have to be taking on the mobile phone effectively with augmented reality, which is going to take this kind of an investment, which is insane. And for virtual reality, you'd have to be taking on something substantial like remote work, like people not having to physically commute to do education and jobs. And he was like, great, let's do those. And so then once that's thrown down and you've already sold yourself, basically. That's a pretty good trick.
You wrote a memo that was circulated in late 2024, and it was published in 2025. You talked about this would be the year of greatness for Reality Labs, a time determining whether the metaverse would go down as the work of visionaries or a legendary misadventure. We're about halfway through the year. Where are you on that trade-off between the visionary outlook and the misadventurehood?
Yeah, history has its eyes on us, so to speak. I don't know if we'll judge it at the end of this year. We'll judge at the end of the decade, but this does feel like the pivotal year. The thing that so many people get wrong is we tend to think of years as interchangeable. We're like, yep, every year you just like turn the crank, you get 1 unit of work, it's all equivalent, and it may average out, but it is definitely not the case that every year is of equivalent opportunity or value. Some years in a decade are just worth more than other years for environmental reasons, for competitive reasons, for technological reasons. we just, coming into this year, we knew we've done a couple of interesting things. We'd broken through with the Ray-Ban Meta AI glasses. It's a convergence of two different investments of ours coming together in a way that was not just exciting to consumers, it's exciting to our competitors. So suddenly we go from toiling in the relative obscurity to being very much in the world with a product that is very attractive to consumers and thus competitors. So your window, the clock has started on competition coming. And that just means that the progress we make in this year is of disproportionate value to any year before or after it closes. And so I really wanted to impress upon, especially some of my younger engineers for whom they're like, oh yeah, cool, this is like another year in the career. This might be the biggest one. You might 5-6 years from now look back and be like, man, that was the year. I should have cranked hard on that year. And we've had years like that before. 2008 was a crazy year for us at Facebook, and there was the downturn, and there was also an opportunity that came with that. So we've had crazy years, and I look back, and they weren't all of equal value. And the amount of work I put into those special years had disproportionate impact on the ones that followed.
What do you need to see by the end of this year to help you answer that question, to determine whether this was make and not break?
Yeah, the way this will be judged in the limit of time is always the market. The market is always the determining factor. Do people adopt the technology or do they not? And that is what ultimately will drive competitors and industries to standardize or formalize around those things. The market is actually, especially when it comes to hardware, a trailing indicator. So you look for early indicators. To some degree, you do have to have a level of confidence and taste in-house. This is something I learned from Sheryl Sandberg. Sheryl used to always talk about most companies don't fail because they got beaten by a competitor. Most companies fail because they didn't execute their own plan correctly. And so what I try to do with the team is really focus us not so much on the competitive landscape as on are we executing to our standards. And so we have a set of ambitious plans for the year. Right now we're on track, but admittedly a lot of these plans are kind of back-weighted, especially some of these research programs are yielding now. So what we'll know by the end of the year is whether we executed on our plan or not. What we'll know in 5 years' time is whether that was enough.
Right, we'll come back to some of your specific plans in just a second. I want to talk a little bit about the announcement that came down just last week with Anduril. You're going to jointly develop extended reality for the military. Last year, you said Meta would let U.S. government and contractors working on NatSec use your AI models for military purposes. Obviously, there's a shift at hand. What's driving? Is it political? Is it economic?
Well, no. So for quite a few of us, it's personal. I mean, so in my case, I have family members in the armed services. I want them to have the best equipment available, and I've always been a very patriotic American and believe in the importance of our role, not just inside the nation, but globally. So there's a much stronger patriotic underpinning than I think people give Silicon Valley credit for. But taking a step deeper, this is actually a return to grace for the Valley potentially, not just from Meta, but from Google and other companies. The Valley was founded on a three-way investment between the military, academics, and private industry. That was the founding of it. There would be no technology if we weren't all tasked with the problem of computing naval ballistic trajectories during the first two world wars. Like, that is the heart and soul of the investment that led to what we are today. And that really got severed for a while there. And some of that's because of the procurement laws that changed in the 60s and 70s. Some of that's the Last Supper that happened in 1985. We ended up just kind of going our separate ways, and I think we're worse off for it. I think we're spending more money for worse technology in the public sector, and I think the private sector is not attacking some of the most valuable challenges for us to solve. And I think it's a mismatch. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunity to bring these two things together. And it makes a ton of sense. If you think about the amount of private investment that Meta has put into developing novel technologies, things like silicon carbide for our Orion AR glasses, these have obviously positive applications for the military. And not just the military, but also for more broadly inside of government. There's a bunch of research that would benefit from this. And we would benefit from them being partners of ours. So you really can work together on these pieces. I'm pretty excited about that. I think there was a period for, let's say, the last decade where there was a silent majority of people who wanted to pursue this technology for public benefit and really felt like they couldn't do that for whatever reason. And I think the tide has turned enough where that majority is actually much more comfortable being vocal about their belief that this is good for not just us as a business, but for us as contributing to the whole of mankind.
How much bigger do you anticipate military will become as a segment for you?
It's way too early to say that. So far, it's like a 0. So let's start with 1 and go from there. I think there's no reason it couldn't be meaningful in the impact that it has. Realistically, consumer markets are the markets that are going to drive costs down for military benefit. When they adopt consumer technologies, or when consumer technologies are developed at scale with their applications in mind, that's when the American taxpayer benefits. That's when the American soldier, service member benefits, because now you've got technology that's at scale, proven for consumer grade, which is really like the only way to get cost-effective new technology. And that's what, by the way, it's not just us. This goes back to pick a favorite. Lockheed, probably the most famous example in the Valley. One of the main reasons that Fairchild is even in the Valley is because of Lockheed. So there's a long history here that we are kind of hoping to return to, but it is not even day 1 yet.
Are there technologies you will not develop for the military? You're working on a framework, and what does that tell you? Like, what shouldn't you do?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, we're not a defense contractor. So the reason we have this great partnership with Anduril, they're a defense contractor. They've got a system and a program. We're supplying them with parts. So everything that we're doing is for consumers. Like we're developing technology with a target on consumer audiences. It turns out a lot of that technology could be multi-use.
Right.
And that is really where I want to establish the partnership. So we're not changing anything that we're doing one way or the other, so much as we're now extending the connection to and through Anduril to the government if they want to take that technology and kind of run the last mile with it.
Got it. So speaking of early days, still early days in terms of Reality Labs, still generating about 1% of revenue, if my math serves, for Meta in the first quarter. A decade from now, if you have your druthers, will we think about Meta as much a hardware company, as a social media, as a communications company?
Yeah, thank you. I certainly hope so. I think we've finally turned a corner to at least turning some heads. I think people are paying attention now to what we're doing in a way that wasn't happening 5 years ago. I think the convergence, not just of the hardware investments, but the AI investments in particular, have been the real watershed for us in helping people understand why we've always believed having these devices be wearable and having sensors and having context in the world around you has been so important. And it's like, oh yeah, of course, now that you realize there's going to be a potentially super intelligent assistant that's operating there, you want it to have, for free, all the context on what you've heard, what you've seen, what you're doing, so it can help you the most out as you go about your day and try to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So we feel a lot of vindication on that. I think the question is, will it be us? Will it be a competitor? That depends on our execution and their execution. I have a lot of confidence that the paradigm that we're in right now, which has been stable for a long time, right? The phone that you all have in your pockets now is roughly the same as the phone you had in your pocket 4 or 5 years ago. There's not really a lot of new innovation happening at that scale. There is a lot of things. The phone is the greatest consumer electronic device ever built, and yet there's also a lot of things that we wish it could do better or different. And I think with AI and integrated context with the world around us, that becomes more and more obvious. So I'm very confident that the paradigm will shift in that time frame. And you all know the saying, we get a lot less done in 1 year than we think and a lot more done in a decade. That really is going to be true, I think, when it comes to these shifts. I hope that when people are using our technology, our hardware, I want the experience of it not to be the hardware. I want the experience of it to be connecting with each other, connecting and being more capable, connecting with superhuman memory and vision and hearing that allows you to accomplish your goals more. Like that, it still should be an experience that is a software-motivated experience, but that would not be possible without this hardware.
Is 10% of total revenue in 10 years way outlandish, or?
I thought this was a CTO conference, not a CFO conference. I don't know why we're no. I mean this in the most generous possible way. We just don't think of it that way. It is a cliche in the Valley, I know, but like if we build the consumer value, I'm very confident that the monetization won't be a problem. If we don't build the consumer value, then it's all going to zero anyways. Yeah. So, never bet against Mark is a reasonably good proxy that we can use here. We are committed. We have conviction in this work, and we're putting the money in to demonstrate that conviction, and we're getting the results out that we anticipated on the kind of schedule that we anticipated. And we don't measure that in market results. We measure that in capabilities that we've unlocked, things that were previously not possible that are now possible because of the work that we've done. And so we have a faith that that will pay for itself in the long run. But I don't have the schedule of returns on me.
Well, looking at the specific products, I had the opportunity. Actually, if you have or have used a pair of Ray-Ban Meta glasses, raise your hand.
It's my people.
So it's a pretty good number of you. I got to try them out. Some of my best friends are Meta Ray-Ban users. You're probably going to see some footage of me trying them on. Really impressed with the sound, really impressed with that ability to kind of listen to music, take photos while you're walking around. Were you surprised by how successful they've been thus far? And can you update us on, last I read, 2 million sold around February?
I'm not going to give an updated unit volume number. I'm getting myself into real earnings jeopardy here, you guys. I don't want to be on the earnings calls. You understand that, right? That's not, the goal of every CTO is specifically to never be on the earnings calls. So it's funny, it's a great evidence of like how small changes make a big impact. Before the Ray-Ban Meta glasses came out, we had the Ray-Ban Stories. And the Ray-Ban Stories were a substantially similar product. They had audio, it wasn't quite as good. They had a camera, it was a little lower resolution. And it just didn't sell that well, and none of us even liked it that much yet. It was kind of cool, but was it kind of gimmicky? And we took another rev at it, and we figured, look, we're gonna do this one more rev. It probably won't do much, and then we'll put the category to bed and we'll focus on the display glasses, the ones that have displays in them. And the team just did an unbelievable job, and you look at it and it looks almost the same. It's just a little thinner, and it's got a little bit better sound, and it's got a little bit better camera, but everything about it is better, and it's night and day. It's a product that you love. So it really is a testament to the team, not to me, not to Mark, but to the team that built this, Lee Chen Miller, among others, who just had put all the polish in all the places, and then the entire package came together. There wasn't one change they made that unlocked the value. And yeah, then as soon as we launched it, it was just an immediate hit. And we had to start scrambling to build more, and now there's we have generations planned going from here forward.
Great, looking forward to that, and looking forward to us breaking news on some of those. What do you think of Apple's Vision Pro, and do you need to move up? Do you need a higher end vision of Quest?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily start with like a market and work back. I will start with like, who are we not serving? What consumers are currently not well served? Apple Vision Pro, you've all probably tried it. Stunningly beautiful displays, really a sight to behold. They did some incredible work doing the eye tracking through the lens, which is why you need insert optics. You can't bring your own glasses because otherwise it wouldn't work, to get really accurate eye tracking. So, from an engineering standpoint, it's wonderful, and congratulations to that team. From a product standpoint, you can tell it's their first offering in the space. Listen, I just told you about how our Ray-Ban Stories didn't do well, so I'm not trying to take anyone out behind the woodshed here. First generation products are hard. It's not until the second or third generation that you really figure out and hone the thing. And they made a lot of mistakes in that in terms of weight and where the weight was. This glass piece way out off the nose, that's a long lever arm, and that lever arm is physics. That's not a good thing when you're putting pressure on the face. So they made some mistakes that as soon as I saw it, I was like, it's a rookie mistake. It's like they'll bounce back from that, but they're gonna regret that one. So I think it was a beautiful device. I think they executed really well on a lot of the pieces of it. I think it failed like what the market wanted for reasons that were predictable if you were in the space beforehand. I'm sure they'll bounce back with something spectacular. I don't know that we need to have a more expensive or a higher end device. I think the question is, what room is there? There's a bunch of things that become possible when you have that high-res display. Looking at small text, if you want to be a productivity user, you want to have really crisp, clear text at a small pixel pitch. And it's much tougher than conventional displays. 'Cause conventional displays, when you turn your head, they stay aligned to the pixel grid. Whereas when you have a VR display and you turn your head, you're now misaligned. So all your true type stuff, it's worthless. You have to do a completely new font layer. And that people forget how hard that technology was to develop for Microsoft in the late 90s and Adobe before that. Tremendously tough technology problems. And so there's a set of jobs that you want to unlock that you need to have certain resolution displays, and those just cost a certain amount of money. So I think it's always driven from what are the use cases you want to unlock and work backwards from there.
Is that something that you are actively considering at this moment?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, and we have been before. We've played with high resolution displays a bunch every generation. It's just a cost benefit question of like, hey, sure, people would love this. Would they love it at the price we would have to charge for it is the question. And thankfully, there's a lot of great investments there. So we're playing with a couple different headsets now. You may have read about them. And none of them are locks for shipping yet, much to the chagrin of the journalists. Sorry, Mark. But there's a bunch that we're playing with, and we're talking to partners about that have some of these ideas in it.
Great, looking forward to that. If you mentioned smartphones earlier, do you see spectacles, headsets as a replacement for or a complement to smartphones?
We've always talked about the mixed reality devices, VR devices, as being kind of a laptop style market. It's like, I use this joke a lot, but have you ever on your phone and you're answering an email and you're like, no, this is not a phone email. This is a laptop email. And you like put your phone down, you like upgrade your power. And you're like, yes, now I have all the windows and I will have all my research. And it's like, this is a laptop email. There's like an increase in power that comes there that we all recognize, and they just like know instinctively when you're in what zone. The headset should feel like that. It should feel like a crazy upgrade. Like, this is not a laptop email. This is a headset email. And now it's like the world is your oyster, and you're just moving things through the universe. So I think there's a story there. Certainly in the limit, I think AR glasses replace smartphones. That's a ways off. Smartphones are incredible, and it's not just that they're great devices and they're convenient, we're used to them. They also have like an incredibly entangled ecosystem of software connected to the rest of the world around us that is going to be very slow to move over. And a lot of people who aren't going to want to move over because it's going to disenfranchise them or disintermediate them. So I think that'll take a longer journey. The good news is they work really well in concert. The platforms don't make it easy. Sundar does better than Tim. But the truth is with AI, you've got this obvious use case where it just makes sense to have these wearable devices, even though you also still have a phone. So we're not in a place anymore where it's like one or the other and you have to pick today. They will coexist for a long time.
Early on, you were responsible for one of your jobs was growing and designing the culture of the engineering team. Tell me about how the culture of the engineering team has changed in recent years, and I'm also curious about many of whom are foreign-born, and we're in a situation now where the government wants to limit the number of foreign-born people who come into the country in various different ways, whether it's student visas, H-1Bs, build a wall at the border. Do you have concerns about that and our ability as a country to continue to be innovative and at the cutting edge?
Yeah, well, working backwards, I mean, so I think we're obviously in favor of high-skilled immigration, and you want to be a net gainer of global talent. And I think that's something that we, very clearly on the record for, and you can see in our employee base, that's something that we believe in. But it's funny, like taking this a cut deeper, like the culture that we care about for engineering is a problem-solving culture. So we have these sayings like nothing at Meta is someone else's problem. So when you come in, we try to indoctrinate every engineer to be like, hey, if you see a bug somewhere, don't just scroll past it. You file that bug, follow up on that bug, help them debug it, like help them get the logs. Okay, if you need to add more telemetry, add that. Like, what are we doing here? And the idea that we all own the whole surface as opposed to being into these niche categories. One of the things that's been interesting, I think, if there's been a big shift the last couple of years, it's a return to focus on what we can control. Like, there are a set of things that we have that we are uniquely capable of doing. We're the only ones shipping AI glasses right now. We're the only ones doing it. And that is it's an incredible opportunity. It's a gift. It's a responsibility. And no one else can do it. No one else in the world, no matter how much they care about it, can do that. There's a bunch of things we could spend our time talking about that are happening in the world that we have no control over. All that time we spend talking about it, no impact. So aligning our ability to have impact with our conversations internally, that's been hugely important to us. So the things that we can talk about, that we want to spend our time talking about as a company internally, are the problems that we have right in front of us, that we're the only ones that can fix. Today, there's someone who can't get into their account because we have a login bug, and that's a devastating impact to that person, and we could fix that. No one else can fix it. So, early on, this was easy, because we only had one product, Facebook. We were all relatively young people. We were living and breathing the product in our personal lives. It was all kind of one thing. That's not the reality today. Today, it's a huge, sprawling suite of products, lots of different things. We have way more specialists than we used to have. People forget, when we started, it was the web. The web was awesome. I missed the web. The web was everything. It was just one surface, and it was all super thin. It was amazing. Then as soon as you went to mobile, okay, well, now you have the web and the Android and the iOS team. That's okay. Well, now we've got hardware. We're working across all kinds of different things. So we have a lot more specialists. We have a lot more surface area. There's a lot more, and we're a much bigger going concern for the broader polity. That we're in the news for a bunch of things, and it's really easy to get yourself worked up into a lather in the news story, but we don't get to control those things. The thing that we get to control is, what am I going to do with my next 8 hours, and I'm the only one who can fix these problems. So that has been the big shift, is helping people, hey, tune out the things that you can't have an impact on. I'm not saying they're not important. I'm not saying you don't care. I'm saying you can't have an impact on it. What can you have an impact? Let's crush that.
Last few seconds, things you can have an impact on. Meta has made some controversial changes around content moderation, drawn a lot of criticism for that. At what stage do you feel it's your responsibility to guard against harmful content and hate speech and an unsafe place for people of color, trans community, et cetera?
Yeah, I think there's two different parts. We want to have this be a safe community. The beautiful thing here is that capitalism actually works pretty well for this, which is if you went to Facebook and you experienced a very negative place, you would not come back. We lose you as a customer. That's why we have our community standards approach, which is like, hey, let's make sure that we're building this place so that the majority of people most of the time are having a mostly good experience. That is why they come back to this site. We really got to a place where people were getting kicked off of the site for jokes that they made, for things that that really was not actual harm to any actual human. Just think about it to yourself. How many people do you know personally, because I promise you it's not zero, that have lost access to their accounts, that got kicked out of Facebook for some reason, they got a warning for some reason? Almost all those stories, those people didn't deserve it. Because we've built these systems, and those systems have a huge negative incentive if they leave something up, but if they kick someone off the account, there's no closed loop there. So I just think anyone who's in an engineering system understands these heuristics have to be tuned. And if you have a penalty function where it's high penalty on false positives, low penalty on false negatives, you're going to have a lot of false negatives. That's just how the system is going to be. So we make these adjustments. They're interpreted through a political lens, but it's really much more practical than that, which is like, we want as many people as possible to have the best experience possible. That is like our wonderful capitalistic incentive, and it works really well. It's why I think we actually have the nicest social networks compared to the competitors. Compared to, pick a favorite, Blue Sky, X. I will take the quality of discourse happening on our networks over those, and I'm in all of them. That's my personal opinion, and that's what our incentive is. So, for us, again, trying to boil it down from an engineering standpoint into what is the real impact here? And making sure we just had systems that were not calibrated. And as a consequence, too many people were losing access to their accounts. They're getting content taken down that shouldn't have been taken down. And you have to make a correction on those things.
Boz, thank you so much. Please join me in giving Boz a round of applause. Appreciate it.